Hey guys, it's Mike. Welcome back. In case this is your first video with us and you didn't see the welcome video that I posted, welcome to MCC Productions. I'm Mike and I will be your tour guide of books in the public domain as well as anything else that comes to mind, such as philosophy, religion, history, and lots of other either boring or dull things. We'll wait and see. So, last time that I posted a video, I said that I will be reading books from the public domain. And I have decided that the first book that I'm going to read with you, or at least start with you, is The Complete Sherlock Holmes. Now this, I got this at Barnes & Noble, much long ago than I would care to admit. But this is the complete works of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle on the character Sherlock Holmes, that famous consulting detective, on whom many television shows and movies have been spun off on. So today we're going to start reading A Study in Scarlet, which was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's first outing with the titular character Sherlock Holmes and his trusty companion, Dr. John Watson. And we'll be looking at the first two chapters, or at least the first chapter, and we'll see how I feel about reading the second chapter. And then we're going to consider A Study in Scarlet versus A Study in Pink, which is the first episode from the first season of Stephen Moffat's critically acclaimed television show, Sherlock, which aired first in, I believe it was 2010. Yeah, 2010. I was in 10th grade. I just aged myself there, so there you go. So, this is A Study in Scarlet by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Part 1, being a reprint from the reminiscence of John Hamish Watson, medical doctor, late of the Army Medical Department. Chapter 1, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. In the year 1878, I took my degree of Doctor of Medicine of the University of London and proceeded to neatly to go through the course prescribed for surgeons in the Army. Having completed my studies there, I was duly attached to the 5th Northumberland Fusiliers as assistant surgeon. The regiment was stationed in India at the time, and before I could join it, the Second Afghan War had broken out. On landing at Bombay, I learned that my corps had advanced through the passes and was already deep in the enemy's country. I followed, however, with many other officers who were in the same situation as myself, and succeeded in reaching Kandahar in safety, where I found my regiment and once entered upon my new duties. The campaign brought honors and promotion to many, but for me it had nothing but misfortune and disaster. I was removed from my brigade and attached to the Berkshires, with whom I served at the fatal battle of Maiwand. There I was struck in the shoulder by a jezail bullet, which shattered the bone and grazed the subclavian artery. I should have fallen into the hands of the murderous Ghazis had it not been for the devotion and courage shown by Murray, my orderly, who threw me across a pack horse and succeeded in bringing me safely to British lines. Worn with pain, and weak from the prolonged hardships which I had undergone, I was removed with a great train of wounded sufferers to the base hospital at Peshawar. Here I rallied and had already improved so far as to be able to walk without the wards, and even to bask a little upon the veranda, where I was struck down by enteric fever, that curse of our Indian possessions. For months my life was despaired of, and when at last I came to myself and became convalescent, I was so weak and emaciated that a medical board determined that not a day should be lost in sending me back to England. I was dispatched accordingly on the troop ship Orontes, and landed a month later at Portsmouth Jetty with my health irretrievably ruined, but with permission from a paternal government to spend the next 9 months in attempting to improve it. Excuse me. Dr. Pepper. I had neither kith nor kin in England, and was therefore as free as air, or as free as an income of 11 shillings and sixpence a day would permit a man to be. Under such circumstances, I naturally gravitated to London, that great cesspool into which all the loungers and idlers of the empire are irresistibly drained. There I stayed for some time at a private hotel in the Strand, leading a comfortless, meaningless existence, excuse me, and spending such money as I had considerably more freely than I ought. So alarming did the state of my finances become, that I soon realized that I must either leave the metropolis and russicate somewhere in the country, or that I must make a complete alteration in my style of living. Choosing the latter alternative, I began making up my mind to leave the hotel and take up my quarters in some less pretentious and less expensive domicile. On the very day I had come to this conclusion, I was standing at the Criterion bar when someone tapped me on the shoulder, and turning around, I recognized young Stamford, who had been a dresser under me at Bart's. The sight of a friendly face in the great wilderness of London is a pleasant thing indeed to be to a lonely man. In old days, Stamford had never been a particular crony of mine, but now I hailed him with enthusiasm, and he, in his turn, appeared to be delighted in me. In the exuberance of my joy, I asked him to lunch with me at the Holborn, and we started off together in a hansom. "Whatever have you been doing with yourself, Watson?" he asked in an undisguised wonder, as we rattled through the crowded London streets. "You're as thin as a lath and as brown as a nut." I gave him a short sketch of my adventures, and had hardly concluded it by the time we reached our destination. "Poor devil," he said commiseratingly, after he had listened to my misfortunes. "What are you up to now?" "Looking for lodgings," I answered, "trying to solve the problem as to whether it is possible to get comfortable rooms at a reasonable price." "That's a strange thing," remarked my companion. "You are the second man today that has used that expression to me." "And who was the first?" I asked. "A fellow who's working at the chemical laboratory up at the hospital. He was bemoaning himself this morning because he could not get someone to go halves with him in some nice rooms he had found, and which were too much for his purse." "By Jove," I cried, "if he really wants someone to share the rooms and the expense, I'm the very man for him. I should prefer having a partner to being alone." Young Stamford looked at me rather strangely over his wine-glass. "You don't know Sherlock Holmes yet," he said. "Perhaps you would not care for him as a constant companion." "Why, what is there against him?" "Oh, I didn't say there was anything against him. He is a little queer in his ideas, an enthusiast in some branches of science. As far as I know, he's a decent enough fellow." "A medical student, I suppose?" said I. "No, I have no idea what he intends to go in for. I believe he is well up in anatomy, and he's a first-class chemist. But as far as I know, he's never taken out any systematic medical classes. His studies are very desultory and eccentric, but he has amassed a lot of out-of-the-way knowledge which would astonish his professors." "Did you never ask him what he was going in for?" I asked. "No. He's not a man that is easy to draw out, though he can be communicative enough when the fancy seizes him." "I should like to meet him," I said. "If I am to lodge with anyone, I should prefer a man of studious and quiet habits. I am not strong enough yet to stand much noise or excitement. I had enough of both in Afghanistan to last me for the remainder of my natural existence. How can I meet this friend of yours?" "He is sure to be at the laboratory," returned my companion. "He either avoids the place for weeks, or else he works there from morning till night. If you like, we can drive around together after luncheon." "Certainly," I answered, and the conversation drifted away into other channels. As we made our way to the hospital after leaving the Holborn, Stamford gave me a few more particulars about the gentleman whom I propose to take as my fellow lodger. Now, you mustn't blame me if you don't get on with him, he said. I know nothing more of him than I have learned from meeting him occasionally in the laboratory. You proposed this arrangement, so you must not hold me responsible. If we don't get on, it'll be easy to part company, I answered. It seems to me, Stamford, I added, looking hard at my companion, that you have some reason for washing your hands of the matter. Is this fellow's temper so formidable, or what is it? Don't be mealy-mouthed about it. It's not easy to express the inexpressible, he answered with a laugh. Holmes is a little too scientific for my tastes. It approaches to cold-bloodedness. I could imagine his giving a friend a little pinch of the latest vegetable alkaloid, not out of malevolence, you understand, but simply out of the spirit of inquiry in order to have an accurate idea of the effects. To do him justice, I think he would take it in himself with the same readiness. He appears to have a passion for definite and exact knowledge. Yes, very right, too. Yes, but it may be pushed to excess. When it comes to beating the subjects in the dissecting room with a stick, it is certainly taking rather a bizarre shape. Beating the subjects? Yes, to verify how far bruises may be produced after death. I've seen him at it with my own eyes. And yet you say he's not a medical student. No, heaven knows what the objects of his studies are. But here we are, and you must form your own impressions about him. As we spoke, we turned down a narrow lane, passed through a small side door, which opened into a wing of the great hospital. It was familiar ground to me, and I needed no guiding as we ascended the bleak stone staircase and made our way down the long corridor with its vista of whitewashed wall and dun-colored doors. Near the farther end, a low arched passage branched away from it and led to the chemical laboratory. This was a lofty chamber, lined and littered with countless bottles. Broad, low tables were scattered about, which bristled with retorts, test tubes, and little Bunsen lamps, with their blue flickering flames. There was only one student in the room, who was bending over a distant table, absorbed in his work. At the sound of our steps, he glanced round and sprang to his feet with a cry of pleasure. "I found it! I found it!" he shouted to my companion, running forward with a test tube in his hand. "I have found a reagent which is precipitated by hemoglobin and by nothing else." Had he discovered a gold mine, greater delight could have not shone upon his features. "Dr. Watson, Mr. Sherlock Holmes," said Stamford, introducing us. "How are you?" he said cordially, gripping my hand with a strength for which I should have hardly given him credit. "You've been in Afghanistan, I perceive." "How on earth did you know that?" I asked in astonishment. "Never mind," he said, chuckling to himself. "The question now is about hemoglobin. No doubt you see the significance in this discovery of mine." "It is interesting, chemically, no doubt," I answered. "But practically, why, man, it is the most practical medico-legal discovery for years. Don't you see that it gives us infallible tests for bloodstains? Come over here now." He seized me by the coat sleeve in his eagerness and drew me over to the table at which he had been working. "Let's have some fresh blood," he said, digging a long bodkin into his finger and drawing off the resulting drop of blood in a chemical pipette. Now, I add this small quantity of blood to a liter of water. You perceive that the resulting mixture has the appearance of pure water. The proportion of blood cannot be more than 1 in a million. I have no doubt, however, that we shall be able to obtain the characteristic reaction. As he spoke, he threw in a vessel of a few white crystals and then added some drops of a transparent fluid. In an instant, the contents assumed a dull mahogany color, and a brownish dust was precipitated in the bottom of the glass jar. "Ha ha!" he cried, clapping his hands, and looking as delighted as a child with a new toy. "What do you think of that?" "It seems to be a very delicate test," I remarked. "Beautiful! Beautiful!" The old Guiacum test was very clumsy and uncertain. So is the microscope examination for blood corpuscles. The latter is valueless is valueless if the stains are a few hours old. Now, this appears to act as well whether the blood is old or new. Had this test been invented, there are hundreds of men now walking the earth who would have long have been paid for their penalty of their crimes. Indeed, I murmured. Criminal cases are continually hinging upon that one point. A man is suspected of a crime months perhaps after it has been committed. His linen or clothes are examined and brownish stains are discovered upon them. Are they blood, or mud, or rust, or fruit stains, or what are they? That is a question which has puzzled many an expert. And why? Because there was no reliable test. Now we have the Sherlock Holmes test, and there will no longer be any difficulty. His eyes fairly glinted as he spoke. He put his hand over his heart and bowed as if some applauding crowd conjured up by his imagination. You are to be congratulated, I remarked, considerably surprised at his enthusiasm. There was one case of von Bischoff at Frankfurt last year. He would certainly have been hung had this test been in existence. Then there was Mason of Bradford, and the notorious Mueller, and Lefebvre of Montpellier, and Sampson of New Orleans. I could name a score of cases in which it would have been decisive. You seem to be a walking calendar of crime, said Stamford with a laugh. You must start a paper on those lines. Call it the police news of the past. Very interesting it might be made, too, remarked Sherlock Holmes, sticking a small piece of plaster over the prick on his finger. I have to be careful, he continued, turning to me with a smile, for I dabble with poisons a good deal. He held out his hand as he spoke, and I noticed that it was all mottled over with similar pieces of plaster and discolored with strong acids. We came here on business, said Stamford, sitting down on a high three-legged stool and pushing another one in my direction with his foot. My friend here wants to take diggings, and as you were complaining that you could get no one to go halves with you, I thought it had been better to bring you together. Sherlock Holmes seemed delighted at the idea of sharing his rooms with me. I have my eye on a suite in Baker Street, he said, which would suit us down to the ground. You don't mind the smell of a strong tobacco, I hope. I always smoke ships myself, I answered. That's good enough. I generally have chemicals about and occasionally do experiments. Would that annoy you? By no means. Let me see, what are my other shortcomings? I get in the dumps at times and don't open my mouth for days on end. You must not think I'm sulky when I do that. Just let me alone and I'll soon be right. What have you to confess now? It's just as well for two fellows to know the worst of one another before they begin to live together. I laughed at his cross-examination. I keep a bullpup, I said, and I object to rows because my nerves are shaken and I get up at all sorts of ungodly hours and I'm extremely lazy. I have another set of vices when I'm well, but those are the principal ones at present. Do you include violin playing in your category of rows? He asked anxiously. It depends on the player, I answered. A well-played violin is a treat for the gods. A badly played one. Oh, that's all right, he cried with a merry laugh. I think we may consider the thing as settled. That is, if the rooms are agreeable to you. When shall we see them? Call for me here at noon tomorrow, and we'll go together and settle everything, he answered. All right, noon exactly, I said, shaking his hand. We left him working among his chemicals, and we walked together towards my hotel. By the way, I asked suddenly, stopping and turning upon Stamford, how the deuce did he know that I had come from Afghanistan? My companion smiled an enigmatic smile. That's just his little peculiarity, he said. A good many people have wanted to know how he finds things out. Oh, a mystery, is it? I cried, rubbing my hands. This is very piquant. I'm much obliged to you for bringing us together. The proper study of mankind is man, you know. You must study him then, Stamford said, as he bade me goodbye. You'll find him a knotty problem, though. I'll wager he learns more about you than you about him. Goodbye. Goodbye, I answered, and strolled on to my hotel, considerably interested in my new acquaintance. I think we'll stop there for the time being. as that is a pretty good chapter. So, Sherlock Holmes, the greatest detective in the world, although some would say Batman is just as good, if not better. But I think it's Sherlock Holmes. He is the original consulting detective. So, I said earlier that we would talk about Stephen Moffat's TV series Sherlock and his updated version of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Study in Scarlet, which is called A Study in Pink. So, what's similar? Well, you can't change the story of Sherlock Holmes too much without it being unrecognizable. Of course, like I've said, Sherlock Holmes is now in the public domain, and you could pretty much do anything you want with him if you wanted to, I think. But Stephen Moffat stayed pretty true to the story. Excuse me. You have Dr. John Watson of the Northumberland Fusiliers, who was wounded in Afghanistan in 2010, sent back home to London, and he meets Mr. Sherlock Holmes, consulting detective who runs a website called The Science of Deduction, which is actually, I believe, the next chapter of A Study in Scarlet. But, does it hold up? I think it does. Both the story and the TV show. Now, there are some things I'm pretty sure there are some things in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle that are in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's book that are a little outdated. Terms, the way he describes things. So I might have to put some warnings in this video. But I think the story holds up, and I definitely think the TV show holds up. It did run for 4 seasons and a holiday special, after all. So I think that's pretty good, all things considered. It's good as a modern retelling of Sherlock Holmes, as well as a good introduction into Sherlock Holmes, because I know for a fact that when I was a kid in 2010, when Sherlock first aired in the United States on PBS Masterpiece Mysteries, that was really my first serious outing into Sherlock Holmes, because I had seen old black and white murder mysteries of Sherlock Holmes. They were like 20-25 minutes, and they would have aired on television, I'm sure, in the 50s or 60s on British television, or maybe even America. I don't quite know. But Sherlock, the TV series, was my first serious venture into the world of Sherlock Holmes. And I think it really does hold up. It's very well written. Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss did a fantastic job of bringing Holmes and Watson into the 21st century. And as we read more from A Study in Scarlet, we will see, I'm sure, more new and exciting things. And I will rewatch A Study in Pink again so that I can look at more similarities and more differences. One of the similarities, one of the differences is how Holmes and Watson met. Now, in the TV show, Sherlock is already a consulting detective. In the books, he is as well. But in the TV show, he's not said to be a student. He's already a well-known consulting detective that consults for Scotland Yard in the world of the television program. And in the book, Mike Stamford, the acquaintance of Dr. John Watson, says that he doesn't really know Sherlock Holmes too well. But in the TV show, he seems to know Sherlock quite well. Well enough that he's on first name terms with him, and they're friendly enough together because Holmes in the books is a lot more personable than Holmes in the TV show. In the book, Sherlock Holmes is charming, maybe a little rough around the edges, but charming nonetheless. In the TV show, he is wicked smart, but at the same time, he's very brash and to the point and describes himself as a high functioning sociopath. But other than that, I'm sure we'll see more similarities and differences as we go through the book and as we compare it to A Study in Pink. Now, I think that's long enough for today. We're at the 26-minute mark. So if you stuck around this long, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I know that the welcome video got a couple of views. A couple of them were from me because I was making sure that it, uploaded all the way. And I'm looking forward to doing this a lot more. Like I said in the last video, I work a 9-to-5 job, so I have to do this as often as I have to work all the time, but I want to do this as often as I can. So next time, we may not continue from A Study in Scarlet, but we will continue with A Study in Scarlet at some point. So until next time, thank you so much, and thank you for watching. See you later.